What do I think of Daniel Thomas? Have you met the guy? It's too nice. I don't trust it. I don't think he's legit. I don't think he's real. To be honest, I don't even think he's Australian. I think it's a fake accent.
Deacon? I don't like that guy. I've been working across town from him for about 2 years. And everything that's come in from him, perfect. How am I meant to compete with that?
He claims to be a piercer. Doesn't even have a Sphinx cat. Like,
And then I meet him, and he's got these big clubs of hands. Everyone knows you need nimble little fingers like these to pierce. I'm gonna sort him out. I'm Daniel Thomas, and welcome to This Modified Life. Today, I'm going to sit down with a man that could slip into your dreams before he puts you to sleep with his hands. I've headed across to Wonderland Studios to chat with Deacon Matheson, a body piercer with nearly 2 decades of experience under his belt, and take him up on a long-standing offer to show me one of his other passions, Jujitsu.
I just kind of fail upwards in life, right? I started kind of getting into piercing, just I think as anyone does, just being pierced. My father had passed away pretty tragically. I was just not really in a good, emotional state. And friends of mine had worked in a studio, which is Tattoos by Zap, back in Owen Sound, where I'm from. Basically, pity was kind of taken on me a little bit. I just wasn't allowed to be by myself. So I kind of got brought in just to do a lot of the grunt work of the studio. That would then lead into picking up an apprenticeship. Pierce was going to be leaving at that time. And if you got a car and someone wants to teach you how to change the tire on it, you should probably say yes. If you're kind of into piercing and someone offers you the chance to possibly be a piercer, I just wasn't at a position where I could be like, you know what, I'm good. Again, I started piercing basically the tail end of the 90s, turn of the millennium. This is before the age of tech startups, weird wacky stuff you can kind of go off and do. It was the most punk rock thing that you could do ever. What do you do for a living? I stab people. And then, it kind of starts to move a little bit beyond the fact of it's not just a cool job. There's something about it that, attach itself to you. And once you start to take that craft a little bit more seriously, and then you start to kind of look at those technical aspects of it. I mean, I went to university for biology. I'm a nerd. At the end of the day, I like weird little just minutia, the hows and the whys that things work. And then we kind of get into constant revision of techniques, and now it's just not just a cool job, but now we're really trying to dial everything in. And then you kind of start to get into your metallurgy and why we're doing what we're doing in the first place, and the greater understandings of those techniques. And I mean, now I just get to look at gold and diamonds all day and get to see the looks on my clients' faces when you kind of give them that piece of jewelry that somehow to them just kind of sparks something inside of them. And making people feel really, really good about themselves makes me in turn feel not so awful about myself.
Looks perfect. I mean, if we're going for adjectives, that one works. Perfect's not bad.
I feel incredibly blessed to be in our second year, because this really for me was kind of an experiment. I reached opening day here and I hadn't quite received my NIA medal order yet, which was terrifying. So it's hey, we're open for business. What can you pierce? Hopefully nothing with labret stud. It was about 2 days that we were technically open before I got my NIA medal order. And then about a week after that, I received another order, effectively doubling our stock. I think part of what we're going to be talking today is things like Jujitsu. And that is kind of part of what made it work. Through training, you get comfortable being in uncomfortable positions, right? Someone's got you mounted, how do you get out of it? And that was basically life. Life had me mounted and pinned down, and I needed to create every little bit of space just to be able to breathe and catch my breath. Ideas of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, being able to think in times of stress and pressure, and being able to kind of see those outcomes and those avenues. If I do this, this is what's going to happen. If I make this mistake, this is how they take advantage of it. And then kind of being able to skirt around those kind of things. It starts kind of working just for your critical thinking skills and problem solving skills across the board, is that all of a sudden, instead of something just being this insurmountable issue, you can kind of start to compartmentalize little aspects of it, and it's solving little bits of a problem and little bits of a problem, and then all of a sudden those solutions kind of seem a little bit easier to find.
Dude, what are you doing?
Rambo never tapped.
aside from the physical attributes that one gains grappling and essentially becoming like a weaponized human being, the sheer mental aspect, the intangibility of it is, I think, probably the most like beneficial thing that jiu-jitsu has done for me. My trip into jiu-jitsu was a little bit different. It wasn't like a thing that I wanted to just like do for like health or fitness or safety or like the respect more so of the martial art. I was actually just in a lot of like altercations in the street, which just kind of happened. Like, I'm a big guy, I'm a tall guy, and I've got friends that are a little bit mouthy, and when you kind of grow up in like the punk rock and hardcore scene, that's just kind of it. So you were a little bit of a policeman for your friends to a certain extent, and as a result you would find yourself in altercations, and there's only so many people you can choke at on the street before you realize you probably need to know what you're doing. The belt system in jiu-jitsu is basically five belts. Usually the most important belt is the white belt, right? You trade in the one that you used to hold up your pants for a white belt. So the first day that you train, you're a white belt. And then we've got white to blue to purple, brown, and black. Your white belt is just, guy that comes for, the first class ever. Even, whoever watches this sitting at home, you are, just so you know, you're technically a jiu-jitsu white belt. You just haven't started training yet. You haven't put on a gi, but you're a jiu-jitsu white belt. Then, like myself, I got my blue belt at about a year and a half of pretty consistent, pretty harsh training. If you look at someone who's, say, like a blue belt, if there was ever any, regrettable altercation in an unsafe environment like, the street, if you got a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, you're probably going to come out on top regardless of who you're fighting. If you know jiu-jitsu and someone does not know anything, then you are definitely going to be okay. I'm just going to fall back. As soon as the back hits. What they always kind of say is like, how long does it take your average person to get a black belt? Well, the answer to that is that your average person is never going to get a black belt. You have to be a little bit more than average in order to do so. A lot of times you kind of look at it like, to throw at a number like 10 years is maybe a little bit more along the lines of accurate. But like, if you're able to like dedicate time and you're just like training 2-a-days every day, 7 days a week, 365, well, obviously your progression is going to be exponential. If you're training any less than like, 2 to 3 days a week, it's going to be a little bit harder to kind of get to that point. I've had my purple belt now for about 2 years, and I don't feel like I'm personally anywhere near close to having a brown belt, and definitely nowhere near close to having a black belt. So, I'm 7 years in, and I don't think that I'm gonna be that person that gets it inside of 10 years. But, at the end of the day, it's one of those minimum goals where you put in enough time and enough effort into something, eventually we'll kind of get there. I think violence has a definite place in society. If we don't have violence in a society, then there's one tool that's just not in your toolbox anymore. Violence isn't always the answer, but sometimes it is the answer. And when you look at something like jiu-jitsu, it's not a striking martial art. There's a very, very strong self-defense component to it. Literally, you can use jiu-jitsu to negate the situation without really doing much harm. So while there's like some martial arts that are striking martial arts, it's literally based on an act of violently executing that technique. With jiu-jitsu, it's you put someone in like a joint lock, or you just quite simply just like find yourself and mount and just like sit on somebody and just kind of ride it out. Like, you've basically taken that situation and nullified that conflict without having to escalate that situation to another level. The entirety of our profession is based around hurting people the least that we possibly can. We were a whole crew of sadists. I don't think that we would be trying to do like the cool freehand techniques that minimize pain and discomfort. Similarly to things like jiu-jitsu, the submission is the last part. Like, there should be a whole lot of not hurt up until that moment where it's just like, okay, so just so you know, we're here now and you're gonna tap. We hurt people because it's just unavoidable, right? But at the end of the day, we try to minimize the discomfort that we put our clients through. And obviously, when we're training jiu-jitsu, if we hurt everybody that we train with, we don't get those body types anymore. Like, the thing about jiu-jitsu is that you cannot get better at it alone. Like, you need to have a solid crew of people and body types to be able to play with. If no one wants to play with you, then you're just rolling around on the floor by yourself, and that's not really as near fun as it sounds. Not even seconded to piercing, it's probably the most difficult thing that I've ever had to learn to do in my life, which kind of ties into, I think, what we do, right? Like, we always kind of have that adage of, like, forever learning. Well, I picked up a hobby, which I'm literally forever learning, which I'm always bad at, but you kind of start to relish those, like, little, like, minute kind of gains.
Alrighty, and there we are, my first ever interview video out there into the world, and you just watched it. Thank you so much. I also want to send a thank you to Deacon Matheson for putting up with me and just dealing with me and how to make my first video. It has been pretty tricky. So send him some love over at ThruXTheXDust on Instagram. Check out his pretty face and all the beautiful piercings that he does. Last week I got to shoot 2 videos, one with a good friend of mine and one that's going to be quite special to me, Jesse Villamere, and another with Vishal Rose. And if you know Vish, you're going to want to watch this because it showed a really different side of him. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put most of my travel-y content on my Instagram. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, it's this_modified_life on there. That's where I'm going to be putting sort of what I'm doing and all that sort of stuff, and then keeping more of the interview and the review type content on here. If there's anything at all that you want to see on this channel, let me know in the comments, and let's go. Thank you so much. I love you all. Oh yeah, and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe and ring the bell and all those things that every YouTuber tells you to do.